Good evening and welcome to the RSU14 Board of Directors special meeting. It is May 21st, 2014. The time is 6:34 and we are here at the Raymond Broadcast Modular. May we have a roll call, please?
Sure can. Kate Bricks.
Here.
Eric Colby.
Present.
Jennifer Fleck. Diana Freusland.
Here.
Marge Scavone.
Here.
Pete Hensler.
Here.
Don Perkins. Jerry Keene Dwyer.
Here.
Katrina Sangster.
Here.
Kate Nealon.
Excellent. You can join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we are actually going to be going into executive session. We just need a motion to do so. Anybody?
I move to approve going into executive session to consider the possible expulsion of a student pursuant to 1 MHSA subsection 4056B.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. And we will be returning in quite a little while. We may be returning to go back into another executive session. We do this evening have a workshop which will estimated to begin at 8:30 p.m. which Christine Hessler will be here for. She's our Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction, and she'll be discussing the state report cards as well as some other district assessment data. So that's 8:30 tonight-ish. Good evening and welcome back to the RSU14 Board of Directors special meeting. We are back from an executive session and I move that the board finds as follows: that the student's actions were deliberately disobedient, that the removal of the student is necessary for the peace and usefulness of the school, that based on these facts, the board hereby expels the student effective immediately for an indefinite period of time, and that the superintendent notify the student and her parents of this action in writing with a copy of these written findings of fact and conclusions. Thank you. A re-entry plan will be prepared by the superintendent in consultation with the student and her family. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay. Now, if somebody can read the next motion.
I move to approve going into executive session to consider the possible expulsion of a student pursuant to 1 MHSA subsection 4056B.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, so we will be returning when we return. Thank you. Good evening and welcome back to the RSU14 Board of Directors special meeting. It's 8:20 and we're returning from an executive session. I move that the board find as follows: that the student's actions were deliberately disobedient, that the removal of the student is necessary for the peace and usefulness of the school, that based on these facts, the board hereby expels the student effective immediately for an indefinite period of time, and that the superintendent notify the student and his parents of this action in writing with a copy of these written findings of fact and conclusions. A re-entry plan will be prepared by the superintendent in consultation with the student and his family.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, and now you're going to go.
The next item in the agenda, we will be going into executive session. We will actually be going into two separate ones, and I will read them both because there is not a vote that will be taken after this. The first one is, I move to enter into executive session to discuss contract negotiations with the Sebago East Shore Education Association pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 405-6D. The second one will be also an executive session with the discussion of the RSU14 Administrators Association Master Contract. I move to enter into executive session, and we can take a vote on both of these together, to discuss the RSU14 Administrators Master's Contract pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 405-6D, and we will not be returning to this special meeting, and we will be coming back for a workshop.
Second. And second. Okay, all those in favor? Okay. So we will, when we return at approximately 8:30, maybe a little bit after that, again, just a reminder that we will be hearing from Christine Hessler, who's the Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction, and she'll be discussing our assessment data and report card information. Thank you. Good evening and welcome back to the RSU14 Board of Directors. This is actually a workshop session, and this evening we are welcoming our illustrious Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction, Christine Hessler, who is going to give us an update on the recent state report cards which came out a week ago or so, as well as some assessment data that the board had requested some information about. So we are excited to have you, Christine, and thanks for all you do. And
Thank
for
you.
updating us, and for sending the information that you sent as well.
I know, I feel a little bad, I did send you a lot. Can we get?
Yeah, I just realized.
Okay. We'll get this set up. Do you want me to begin with the 3 things you requested first?
Sure.
Okay. So, that's okay. No, we'll, hey.
What, free lunch?
Yeah.
Do you want that? Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, okay. Where'd that come from?
That's the summer lunch program in Windham. St. Joe's doesn't.
So just for the sake of the public, we, as a board, have set some goals about doing workshops and devoting more time to that. And sorry, we are not supposed to be doing it at 9 o'clock at night, but that's what happens sometimes, especially in the spring. But one of the things that, as a goal, was to enhance some of our workshops, and particularly to gain some more insight about our assessments, and specifically we had requested information about SAT scores, as well as some of the information about the need for remediation after high school. And the third thing was information about a certain
NWEA. Yeah.
NWEA,
Yeah.
exactly, which is another assessment tool.
Great. Well, we're going to start off with the NWEA data. And for those of you that were with us this fall, some of this you'll have seen in the annual achievement report. But these are the things that we talked about, and we have some changes coming, so this is a great opportunity to talk about some of the things that you're looking for, and then some of the upcoming changes that are being made. I don't know why that just turned off, but we'll get it right back on. Oh, there we go. So the first piece of information that you wanted to take a look at was our NWEA data, and looking specifically at grade 4. And the chart that I brought up for you tonight shows our median data, our growth data. The NWEA tests annually 2 million kids, and what they do is they norm all that data and they try to figure out where do the kids land, and especially the growth points that they make. So right now, students are tested in the fall, and then they're followed up in the spring, and we look at those growth percentages of where they are. So if you look at this graph, you'll see that in reading, students are making, this is smaller than the average is 50, and right now we have 65 and 68%, and then we're a little bit higher in our math range. So that means if you were to put all the kids up together, we're already over the 50th percentile. Kids are making those gains in those areas based on this norm test. The NWEA has been with us for a long time, and this year the leadership team has made the decision that we had stopped using NWEA this year in the high school because it was a brand new test that was directly aligned to the PSATs, which is directly aligned to SATs. So the decision was made, why do something that correlates when we can get the exact? Another test is coming out for us. And so the leadership team decided we will be doing the NWEA testing in grades 2 and grade 3. Because the other grades will be having soon the Smarter Balance Assessment, which is our brand new assessment, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but that's a spring assessment. They're also coming out with a fall check-in that kids can do, which directly correlates to the new test. What we're hearing right now is that it won't be ready for this fall, but we've decided to not spend the funds to do the NWEA when we know this other one is coming, when we're looking at some really hard budget times. We are keeping it in grades 2 and 3 because it's a great growth measure for kids, and it's a way to get them to start learning to take assessments on the computer. Because moving forward, our new assessment is all computerized. So as much as you had me pull 4th grade, I thought, oh my gosh, we've got some changes. So maybe looking forward, you want to look at 3rd grade NWEA data, because we will still have that data point and have those trends. So there's one piece of information that we traditionally look at in the RSU. The annual achievement report, which is also online, and you can see all the past years, the ones also that Chris Howell did, are there, so you can go through, and we've had steady growth in this area as an instructional tool for our teachers. So it's another piece of the puzzle. So there's one part.
May I ask a question?
Sure,
about
please.
The Smarter Balance?
Yep.
The thing I loved about the NWEA, if I'm thinking correctly, they take it in the fall.
Yep,
And they take it in the spring.
correct.
Huh? And they potentially they could take it in the winter.
Potentially, they could take it in the winter. Usually, they would take it in the winter if kids were doing interventions and they wanted to get a quick check-in
Right.
with that.
With the
So-
Smarter Balance, is that only going to be given in the spring?
Smarter Balance final testing for the big tests, like our kneecaps were, will be tested the last 12 weeks of school. That will be, instead of a fall test, it's now a spring test.
So will we not be getting anything?
You will not be getting anything next year till the end of the school year.
So is there anything coming down the pike? I'm just trying to wrap my head around this.
The
Where you get the
yeah.
beginning of the year with your same cohort and the end of the year so that you can see the growth.
The only thing that they were supposed to get, and they haven't solidified it yet because it's not in our hands, is the Smarter Balance piece. You can test kids up to 7 times before they take the test to see if they've moved the needle for that piece. But I don't know for sure, and they are not releasing any more information out because right now the Smarter Balance Assessment, the RFP is out in the state of Maine, so they don't have a vendor yet. So until they get that vendor, like College Board might pick it up and be the vendor that gives us all the manuals and the instructions, we don't have the answers to those questions. So we're waiting to hear.
Is this a national test then?
Every state is either taking Smarter Balance or they're taking Achieve. So our state has adopted Smarter Balance. They're both very similar, they're both computerized, but that's the look of the new, basically the new kneecap of what we're using.
You referred to a check-in, a fall check-in.
yeah.
It's like an NWEA test, but I don't know if it shows growth. That we've been told.
So that's what we don't.
We've been told it's NWEA-like. That's as far as we could get our answers to, and we've been knocking on the door to try to get this piece. So
Now, that Smarter Balance, exactly what grades are they doing? using
grades
fall?
3 through 11. So, and you'll see later, which I can, this isn't a big surprise, but the Smarter Balance assessment is taking place of the SAT at the high school. All 9th, 10th, and 11th graders will take it. The SAT next year will now become optional like it was the year before. So not all 3rd-year students will be taking the SAT next year.
Now, if
I know, I'm sorry, Kate.
Now, if the Smarter Balance is grade 3 through 11, and the NWEA is going to be grades 2 and 3, are third graders taking?
The third graders will take it twice. They'll do the fall.
they'll
It's
do
the two
NWEA
tests.
and the Smarter
Yep.
Balance.
Yeah. So,
It's actually less tests though, because it used to be
Yeah.
2 to NWAs and 1 kneecap.
and one kneecap.
And now it's gonna be 1 Smarter Balance.
Yep.
And one NWEA.
Right.
Only for the second and third grades.
So,
Again, how
If
are
growth
you
is what we-
measuring
yeah.
growth?
right,
I know.
How do you measure growth? Okay, we know how they ended up, but we don't know how they started.
right. You can measure growth from Smarter Balance spring to spring as they come out. But again, we're gonna have to wait 3 years to see any trends in that piece. So,
And the little, you said there were 7
sub-test and yep, we're waiting for that piece of what
Are they comprehensive that you can be, like, say you take one in October,
Mhm.
could you compare that data to the end of the year data? Or is it a different
We're being told that it's NWA, like that you're gonna be able to take and know where you are.
apples
and-
to apples?
Apples to apples. It's a direct line to the state test that they're taking. So what it's proven for is if you take a test in October, you know basically how you're gonna do in the spring. Well, in between now and my spring test, I know the things I need to work on in order to score well on the spring test. It's the direct line. It's not a, correlation piece. But they don't have it out yet. The prediction was to have it this fall. When we were in budget time, we were told it would be out this fall, and now we're hearing it's not going to be ready for the fall. So,
I feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for me. I feel sorry for parents.
yeah, I
because
agree with you.
You know
There's-
what? My head is spinning with all the acronyms and when they take it and the data and everything else. I'm
Right.
really kind of peeved.
Yeah.
I'm really peeved.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's
Yeah.
not you.
I was just wondering how we made the decision to switch testing before the new test was fully defined and had a vendor.
Because that's our law. We are told we're taking Smarter Balance next spring. That is, the kneecap is gone. You're now moved to Smarter Balance.
Who's, the state said
The
that?
state, yeah. We don't have a choice in this matter. So we're moving forward to getting ready for Smarter Balance. Smarter Balance has said, we're going to have this test for you to check points along the way. Implementation was supposed to start this fall. It's not, we have not heard of people, we're cautious, we're not thinking it's ready. So, but we were told before it would be ready, so we had made the decision on the NWEA because we were looking at budget pieces. And the NWEA is over $14 a student when we do that piece. And so we said, okay, what if we have the Smarter Balance one and it's gonna align, we're gonna be all set. Now we're sitting and we're like, okay, so do we stay with our original plan, NWEA 2 and 3, and just have a fall, we don't have growth data, we can use the data from the spring, and that's what teachers will do, is the kids are taking NWEA right now in the spring, so they'll use that score to help them establish where kids are in the fall.
So this testing isn't to benefit our students, this testing is just to benefit,
It's a federal
states and-
accountability piece and a
Yeah.
state stature, so,
that's the
The intent,
that's the frustrating part, is that
Yeah.
this isn't doing anything to benefit our students, this is,
well, your hope is, I'm assuming, that there'll be, because the NWEA's had a growth
correct.
model, and my guess is you're hoping that there's going to be something that the teachers can utilize in
Correct.
that way, like they did.
Correct.
Diana?
Just to clarify, so we're doing away with the kneecaps and the NWEAs just for the one test now?
There is no more kneecap. Kneecap is totally gone. We have no control over that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
So that's gone, and also NWEAs, and we're just gonna do one test now instead of the 2?
Yes,
That's it, that'll just be a
Unless there's a
spring
fall
test.
assessment.
right, unless the
Coming up.
fall assessment is published and we can use it this fall. So,
And a Smarter Balance is supposed to
Right.
test kids against the Common Core, the new
Right.
standards that are across the country, and they're much more rigorous
Right.
standards.
Some people say.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
not.
Yeah, that's
every-
vague.
Yeah, let's be careful how we
That's-
do it.
That's how they're selling
There's
it.
states that are now opting out
yeah.
because it's not.
Right.
May I ask about, are we still doing the PSAT?
Yes.
And then after the SAT is optional?
The SAT is going back to be optional, because right now, the state pays for every third year high school student, every junior, to take the SAT. Now, every 9th, 10th, and 11th grader will take the Smarter Balance test. So if a student, like when I was in school, if you're planning on going ahead to college and the colleges you want to go to require the SAT, you will now be taking the SAT. Well, that's what we haven't heard yet. We're wondering if the students have to pay for it, or if the state is going to pick up that for the
PSAT?
for the SAT.
Oh, for the,
So, and we don't have that answer yet. I mean, those are the things that we keep bringing to the DOE, and we need some
Is
clarification
the
on.
state paying for the Smarter Balance tests?
Yes,
All of them?
all of them.
Even if you want to do 9 during the year? You said you
No,
could do
we'll
up
have to pay, but the price is much significantly lower than the NWEA. So it'll be about half the price if you want to dip into those other ones. So we keep getting everything turned upside down. I apologize, I wish I was coming here tonight with some concrete things, but we don't have control of what state wants to do, so it's really frustrating. Eric, sorry.
Well, are there other districts, and if you know this,
Yep.
that have implemented anything else on their own to show a matrix of growth or problem area?
Good,
and not
really good
relying on the
question.
state?
Some, you have to do the state testing, or we
Right,
don't
right.
get any money.
Right.
Some of the districts that we work with in southern Maine and actually in central Maine, some are keeping the NWEA and some have dropped it like we have. And I think every district is facing budget issues, so what do? You know, we're trying to all figure out to provide services and things for kids, and I can certainly, if you feel we need to keep the NWA for the year, I can certainly bring that back to leadership. But that's where everybody is standing. Every district is sitting in the same place going, oh my gosh, you know, the other fear is we pay the bill and we do the NWEA, and then this other one comes along, and now we're jumping and getting kids all the time, so.
Yes,
The leadership team really felt like, you know, we want our time to instruct our kids.
Yes,
Right.
and I don't
So-
want to be teaching to multiple tests.
right.
Correct.
And from what I understand and from what I've observed, there are all kinds of mini assessments going on all the time
Correct.
in our classrooms.
Yeah.
There are pre-assessments, what do kids know before we learn this material? And these are appropriate
Yeah.
to helping teachers instruct. What do my kids know? What do I need to get them to know? Did they learn it? Yay, okay.
And we also have
Okay, but
our
is
3-time.
that available
Yeah.
as data?
We're doing it.
Oh, yeah,
We're
we
doing
have
it.
that in
We're doing it.
Amesweb as well.
Yeah.
We have a 3-time-a-year check-in where kids, the longest the test is an 8-minute check-in for kids on math computation. But we have reading probes and math probes that we use all the way up from grades kindergarten to grade 8. Those dipstick checks, wellness checks to
And
see where kids
personally,
are.
I would much rather see more of that. And I mean, for us to just keep sitting them in front of computers, stressing kids out, stressing teachers out, to me, I don't think we should be adding more tests.
One of the things, it's funny that staff has said when we've talked about it, they're like, oh my God, I can start instructing in the fall. I don't have to stop for NWAs, I don't have to stop for kneecaps. And they're like, oh my gosh, we can finally start the year off without that pressure of I've got to get kids ready for this test and we've got to move. So,
Yeah, but I don't think that's what I was saying.
yeah.
no, I don't either.
I would say it's just a measurable way of growth. And yes, that probably comes out in tests, and obviously I don't want to stress kids out. I know my son doesn't like to test anybody else, but how do we measure that growth? How do we see?
Well, what she's saying is from spring to spring is the growth that we're going to see. Instead of from fall to spring, we're going to see it from spring to
But she
spring.
said 3 years to a trend.
Well,
Well, we
yeah.
can start, what we did with the kneecaps, Eric, is we took, when a grade started in grade 3 with the kneecaps, we followed those kids, grade 4, grade 5, so we could see how that cohort of kids were doing. As parents, you get a report how your individual child does, so you can see their growth as well. We will do the same thing. I mean, if they say, research, you need 3 years to really see a trend. And it will be 3 years till we get a new report card because they wait for the statistical trend. But we can certainly look at our Smarter Balance pieces and keep track of our cohort of kids going through and look for that piece. So those are things we watch really closely because we also need to see if our curriculum is aligned and our kids are moving through the pieces they need to move through. So I know it's really fuzzy and Again, I
Well, yes,
apologize.
it's not so much that, but that's fine.
Okay.
There's probably more information coming out as we talk.
I have a student who wants to go to college, hypothetically.
Yeah.
Will this, and the colleges that I'm looking at require an SAT score? Will my student have an opportunity to take the PSAT in school?
Yes, the PSAT stays the same.
The PSAT stays the same,
So everyone takes it?
Yeah,
and we
And-
pay for it.
and we pay for it. It's the SAT that
We don't know.
Chris Howell thinks the state is going to pay for it because it's another transition. He's really hopeful, and you know how he's usually like pretty much dead on, but he's thinking, you know, I really think they're gonna have to pay for the SAT. So,
Okay, so that's still up in the air.
that's
But,
still
but they will only pay for the kids who choose to take it.
correct.
But the PSAT is a
The
requirement.
PSAT is, I believe, and I will double check for you, Kate, but that's usually a universal and all kids are doing it.
And is that the one where, you know, I've heard our principals are running around picking up kids in the morning because we gotta.
No, that's the SAT. That's the SAT, because you get graded on your participation rate. Seriously, you,
We did hear.
Door-to-door service,
Yeah.
Dunkin' Donuts on the way.
They pick
Mr.
kids
Howell
up.
in the minivan picking kids up to take the SAT. So,
All right, we're gonna let you continue with
Okay.
your, sorry.
no, this is perfect, because this is what
No,
we
I-
need to do. We need to
yeah,
flush this
Yeah,
out.
you guys-
And so, speaking of the SAT, you asked for some trend data on our SATs. And so, and I can also send you this PowerPoint, but this is, again, the same thing that Chris Howell presented to you in the annual report, and I've added this year's scores on them. And so when we look at the data for the trends for reading and for math at Windham High School, we are usually slightly above the state average. And the dips that you see in some of the years are also dips in the state, which I thought was really interesting. That when the state dipped down, we dipped down. When the state dipped up, we dipped up. So we pretty much
Is
follow
there
this.
anything that you can correlate that to?
Yeah, the test itself.
Oh.
When you, the way that the test is
thought there was something
given,
in the
every
water.
kid, yeah, no, but when
Oh, you're dumb.
you start to see trends when you start looking at huge numbers, and you
Yeah.
can usually tell,
So they changed the test.
they changed part of the test, and, you know,
They made
they
it
also.
really easy in that, whatever year that is on the.
Well, I don't think easy, but, and they also show this as trends of 3 years for the SAT, so you're just not looking at one group of kids. So
Can I
when
ask
they
what
come in-
meets the standard on an SAT? What's your score if you meet the standard?
You would ask me that. I'd have to get back to you on
And
it. It's
exceeds-
1140, I want to say. I want to see 1140 as the meets, and the exceeds is anything above that piece. But it's a scale broken down, and I can get that for you.
I'd be curious about that.
So, but it goes to their final
it's
scoring and all the data
570.
points and pieces like that, but.
Math and science.
So, and they all have a cutoff score like the kneecaps have as well. So, and the kneecap, if you're a third grader and you get a 340, 40 is the cut number, and you're in third grade, that's why the 3's in front. That means a third grader, 40 is you're at proficient. So if you're a fifth grader, it's 540, you want the score proficient. So you can kind of see those trends. And then the SAT will give you the 11, they get into the 1100 pieces, so, yes.
Have they changed the SAT yet? There used to be 2 components, and then they're going to 3.
We take the science one as well. There's a science MEA test the high school also takes, but they take the reading and they take the reading and the math right now, so,
And did I hear they were removing a writing component?
yes,
Yes.
yes. That's another
Remove
piece
it,
that's
right.
coming,
Removing.
That's because we don't teach kids to
I
read anymore.
don't get it.
so,
They've added a texting component.
Yeah.
yes.
Snapchat.
Oh, boy, you got, so this little paragraph summarizes what I was just speaking about, the peaks and valleys in the how we've measured with the state, and literally staff picking students up to get them to the school on that Saturday to take the test. Because when we look at the state grading formula, you'll see what happens if you don't do that. So, I also put in here the science piece, which, because of this board and the pieces that you've given to the science department, the achievement and the number of percentage of students receiving a 3 or better on the AP scores, kids are knocking it out of the park at Windham High School, and that our students are scoring in the top 10 on American Chemical Society exam. So you know, the science piece that you've added at the high school and the support you've given is showing high achievement and opportunities for the kids at Windham High School.
Excellent.
So I wanted to share with you that piece, because that's another part that is really important for you to understand.
On that note, at some point, I would really like to see the data on all of our AP scores.
Okay.
How many kids are taking APs in the different subjects, and how many kids are getting whatever,
Okay.
you know, or what percentage of kids are getting a 3 or above?
I believe in Chris's report, he'll have the data from last year. The kids are taking them right now, this
Yeah.
month. But I believe it's in there. We could easily pull that up for you. But they're working really hard this last couple of weeks.
Could tell her she has to run again or she won't be able to see it.
I know, that's true.
It's,
I'm gonna be sitting in my
I was
PJs
thinking if I
watching
was-
you guys, so I wanna hear it.
and so the Smarter Balance Assessment, it starts in the spring of 2015, and you have a 12-week window to give this test. We have 12 weeks, so we will have to figure out, you know, scheduling purposes, and the problem is everybody's gonna wanna be the end of the year because they wanna get more instruction in, so we're gonna have to all be doing that piece. And this goes down to grade 3, but because I had it next to the slides with the high school, all 9th, 10th, and 11th graders will be taking this assessment as well. The SAT, which we talked about, will be an option for students. And then again, they will tell us we need 3 years of data to start looking at trends. But that's the changes that are coming, which, you know, we were looking at SAT trends, and I was sitting with Chris Howell, and I said, oh my gosh, and we can't even use that because that's going to change. So, you know, we're trying to find things. Yes?
So the tests that the kids have been taking, and there's in my kid's lifetime been multiple different ones, have been really focused on numeracy and literacy. Is Smarter Balance also primarily numeracy and literacy?
Numeracy, literacy, and a
So
writing
we're not,
component.
so we're not testing any kind of
No,
other.
no.
So much for STEM.
No. I will share with you, we met as a group of Southern Maine leaders, and we met with our tech departments as well, and there were some districts in the state that pilot tested the Smarter Balance Assessment because they need to field test and work out bugs and things like that. And people were really nervous because it's an interactive test and kids need to slide rulers over, and the keypad comes up and does it work on an iPad, and you know, all these different components, and they said hands down the kids had no issues navigating it at all. Everybody was like, the kids were fine. The staff, however, was a train wreck. So we will be doing a lot of implementation on how to proctor the test moving forward. And that's why we're very anxious to see who the vendor is, because it's their responsibility to provide training materials for staff, training materials for leaders, and walk through this process. So we will start next year helping staff navigate. There are practice tests and practice questions you can do with kids to start getting them used to what it looks like, kind of feels like, those pieces in there.
Did you say you can't do this, the Smarter Balance test on an iPad?
You can. No, you can. I'm
Oh, I
sorry.
thought-
No. They tried it on all kinds of different devices
Oh,
throughout the state. I can tell you, though, that some districts said that they were getting emails daily about changes on the test, so it was a really complicated process. And I will share with you, we chose not to field test because we did not feel we could give up hours and hours of instruction time for scores that we never get.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We felt that we're working really hard in tons of areas, and we didn't want to be the first ones jumping in. And God love those people that did it, because they're sharing what their experiences were. And then at the end of the day, it was like, but it's probably going to be totally different because it's a whole new rollout. So I was like, oh, thank God. Like, I was like, I can't imagine having to go back to our teachers and kids and
Yeah, thank
putting
you.
them through that piece. So, anything else on Smarter Balance that it's changing? And as soon as I know more information, I can certainly do a little update and give it to Sandy to pass to you, so when we have some. But we don't control when information comes out of the DOE. We just monitor as carefully and quickly as we can. So, another piece of data you asked for was remediation post-high school. And so those of you that don't know Nicole Sturgis, she is at Windham High School. She is a brilliant person. She is our Jobs for Maine graduates.
She
and-
presented
Yeah, we
that.
met her.
Yeah, so
She was
you know,
excellent.
so a lot of this, but
Yeah.
she was able to pull up for me the data, because you had said, well, how many kids need remediation when they go on to college? So we had some really good talk, and I have some other resources to share with you if you'd like. But some of the things that we do, we have the AccuPlacer, and one of the things I guess I didn't realize, is she was sharing with me that different community colleges have different cut scores of the AccuPlacer. So kids could be at Windham High School, take the AccuPlacer, and different community colleges need you to get to a different level to even get entrance. She shared that she has some students whose SATs are under a 300, and they have gotten into four-year colleges, but they can't get into a community college because of the AccuPlacer. So she said it's so frustrating trying to help kids navigate this world when every college has a different kind of cut score piece with it. So she's working with Maine community colleges to help streamline that process and to help our students. So daily, she has kids in there right now. She actually, based on the data last year, and I'll share that with you, some kids that needed remediation that left Windham High School, she does a pre-AccuPlacer class with them to get these kids ready and get them, hopefully performing better so they don't need remediation. So she's in the background with our high school seniors right now, getting all these pieces done, which is pretty amazing.
Just for clarification, to get into a community college, you have to take the AccuPlacer?
Mhm.
So it's not the SAT?
Correct. Some want SAT, most want AccuPlacer. Some colleges, when you arrive on campus, they have you take the AccuPlacer then during your orientation. So they've already accepted you, and now they want to place you in your English and language classes, so they have you take the AccuPlacer on campus to place you in the correct level. So last year, I know that any Windham High School graduate that went to a four-year college, not one student needed remediation. So that was one piece of data that we had.
That's excellent.
And when we look at the college
So
report.
How do you know, that's any college in Maine or any college, do you know that from the colleges across the
It's
country?
in the Mitchell report, which I have right here, so we can, I believe they follow kids wherever they go and collect that data back. Because this is a key component, which, when you asked me for this piece of data, I thought, wow, this is where we're really reaching to try to
Right.
find out when our kids leave.
Yeah.
So there is the Mitchell Institute, which is collecting data, the Maine Community College System is collecting data. Nicole Sturgis is hot on this topic, which is incredible because she's out there, and then she's able to really tell you what's going on when we're trying to get kids
Right.
where we need to get them. So, and
That's
the
really true, that is great.
That is remarkable.
in the fall report, which has to come out, there were, out of the 2,000 students in Maine that went directly into community college from Maine high schools, there were 1,000 of them, or 52% of them, that needed remediation.
Crazy.
Sheesh.
Yeah, and then in
Embarrassing.
Wyndham, our students, there were a total of 34 students, and 20 of them needed remediation in those college pieces. A little more than math than the reading, but because of that number, that's why Nicole Sturgis is doing what she's doing based on the data that we get back. So, again, it's a good data point to help us in programming of what do we need to for our students to do, and what we need to prepare them for. So,
So, all right, I'm confused. What, you said there were 0 students a minute ago that needed remediation.
no, this is just community
Four-year
college.
colleges versus community
Right.
college.
They separate them, community college,
So everyone who went to a 4-year school did not need remediation?
That's
correct,
34 went to community colleges and...
and 20 of them needed remediation, so that's where we are.
Guess it's tougher to get into community college than it is to St.
Well,
Well,
I
no.
think what
I
it
know,
says
I
is
know,
kids who
I
are
know.
struggling academically continue to struggle academically.
Right.
Yeah.
But the question is, can we do more to support them before they move
Correct.
on?
And we had a really great conversation, and I'll share this with you because, we also look at, and Nicole is starting to probe of, what are you doing to support students once they're on campus? Because that's a whole change, and if you're already coming in and you're a little bit academically not as strong, and your first couple months are not successful, what supports do you have in place to keep these kids in school and to help them through that process? And instead of just saying it's the high school's fault. It's interesting to know, I wonder what kind of programs they do for kids once they say, okay, we're gonna accept you, and we think you're ready, but if you're not, you're out. I mean, that's the other issue.
So she's kind of turning the tables on them, and hopefully what she's gonna do is recommend kids to certain schools that are gonna support them.
Correct. So it's really interesting to look at it from that end. We have a student in the office right now, and we had a great conversation about this, and she just said, once I hit campus, I took the acuplacer and I was fine, and she said, but it's amazing that you're either sink or afloat, and there's nobody there to guide you. She said, and I said, well, why were you successful? And she said, because of what I did at the high school. I mean, she was very open about it. She's like, I knew how to study, I knew how to problem solve, and she said, and but other kids didn't have that, and you know, you have freedom kind of for the first time, and you're on your own, and it's, you know, you think about those pieces. Kate, I'm sorry.
I had heard, and I don't know if it's fact or not, it might have been fabrication out of my little mind here, that if you have remediation in wherever,
Yep.
community or regular college, that the odds of you dropping out are far greater.
Correct.
So I'm wondering, for the 20 students that needed remediation, and I don't know what the time frame is that you know, whether this was over this past year or not, but how many of those 20 might have dropped out?
I know, I bet she could find that for us, because she's following our students, because this is her second year.
I think
here.
she told us, but I can't remember, that was my question.
Yeah, because I think she's following these kids to find out what is it, and then, you know, reaching out to kids and trying to help them. They're still our kids. We kind of get a little possessive, because they leave us, but you want to see them succeed, so.
Yeah, I think she calls every one of them.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
does.
she does.
Yeah, so in this slide, and I'll email, these are some links for the full college, community college report. And there's 2 of them, and then there's a remediation report, and there's a Press Herald link that did a story to examine that data for you. So she sent those to me as well. It's more in-depth information, you know, reading if you want to sit and go through these pieces, but it's fascinating, and it's captured, and it's just there. So that's another piece. I can tell you that the community college report that I shared with you has to go out publicly by January 1st every year. So this is a public document. So this is something that you would have each year if you decided to use part of that as a goal that you're looking forwards in the future part. So it's something they have to report out. So
Is the percentage of remediation?
correct.
Everything,
Yeah,
At
and
the
it breaks it
community
down by
college.
every community, every school in the state. You'll see how many kids went, how many needed remediation, if they needed it in reading or in math, or if they needed it in both. It breaks every piece down for you.
What's the name of it again?
The Maine Community College System, and I can pass that around. And then the other report behind it is the Mitchell report, which is done, which focuses on that piece.
Is the Mitchell report a state thing or
A state piece,
Okay.
I believe, so it's right underneath that.
And, shoot, I was gonna ask another question about it. I'll come back to you.
It's okay, you can freelance. So, the next piece is the state report card. And I wanted to walk through this view because this is only our second year with this. There are some slight variations, but I wanted you to understand what the factors that based on our grade, which is made very public to everybody, and it's where we are at right now. I had Cindy send to you the report cards for every school. There's another piece that I wanted to pass out to you, and I kind of call it my cheat sheet, and I'll have Sandy pass it to you when we're ready, but so you can understand how the grade is actually calculated. So it's based on several factors: student achievement in reading and math, growth and progression in achievement, growth in the bottom 25% of students, and that's for middle school and elementary only. And then the high school has added on to it the graduation rates, the 4- and 5-year graduation rates. So I'm going to go through each one so you can just understand, and please stop me if you have any questions. But the other piece you need to, we kind of joked about Mr. Howell running around picking up kids, and this is why. State law says that a school must meet a 95% participation rate. That was in place even before the grading system came out. If less than 90% of your students do not test, if you're less than 90, you get an automatic F. If you're between 90 and 95, it will result in one letter grade down. So right now, the Windham High School has a C. If we had less than 95% kids, but more than 90, we would have dropped to a D. So they will automatically put you down under their formula that they're using. So what I wanted to show you here were our results from last year compared to our results this year. You can see the only change that we have is the Manchester School last year had a D on the state report card, and this year they have a C, so they've actually gone up. Windham Primary School does not count in this formula. They are only a K-3 school. They do not have enough grade levels to support a trend in data to show growth. So that's why we don't have anything. But Windham Primary School is very adamant that they're part of that Manchester score. So they are not just dancing around saying we don't have to do it. They know that that is fed into there. So what they do is they give you points for each section, and the graph that that table that I gave you breaks it down into a progression. But you add up all the points at the total, and you can see what you need to do, what the scale is, and how many points you get equals your grade. And for elementary and middle, they calculate the score. 50% of your grade is the proficiency, and 50% of it is growth. And if you look at the side column of the report card, it tells you exactly what you need to do to those numbers for that piece. The high school's a little bit different. Their grade points translate different. It's not the same scale. Theirs is 40% proficiency scores, 40% progress, and then 20% their graduation rate. And so they have that factored into there as well. Yes?
I have a question on the high school results.
Yep.
It says Penders, the principal.
Yes,
and it's
I
only
know.
grade
We've
11.
contacted the state for 2 years in a row, and we still don't understand why her name is to there.
But it also says it's only grade 11.
Well, because they only use the 11th grade SAT scores for their student data. That's the only thing they do.
Huh.
I know.
Okay.
So the calculations you have in front of you, and I apologize, it's a little blurry, but what I did is, we were given on April 1st, we were given our data, and so we would have the ability, if we could follow the directions, to actually figure out our scores before they came out public. So that was the first thing we did one night, just to sit there and go through. So you have my little chart of what I was sitting on the couch that night, figuring out where we landed this year and doing all the calculations. So, and again, the scoring for each of the schools is on the bottom, and full points for proficiency, and then the growth points are calculated, and they're cut in half, and you get that many points. The frustrating thing I will share with you on the growth points is they don't correlate growth year to year. And this is the really frustrating part, why this is really hard for people to understand, is if you have a 4th grade class last year who tested 4th grade and they were kids who didn't do well, they moved on to 5th grade. But they compared the 4th grade growth of last year to the 4th graders this year, so they're not comparing apples to apples, it's apples to oranges. So,
That's dumb.
okay.
How do you feel about that, Kate?
It's dumb.
I need you to understand that, so if you look and say, why aren't our kids growing, it's not the same kids, and so
Yeah,
that's
that
really
makes no
difficult
sense
to
whatsoever.
try to look at.
So it's a trend in that age?
No,
No, it's
No.
a trend
No.
in that grade.
no,
No,
not even a trend. It's just
There's no trends, there's nothing to trend on. You have no base.
different kids.
It's
a
different
trend
kids.
of 4th graders.
Yeah.
No, it's a trend
No,
of
they
the
take
4th
the-
grade, not the
Right.
kids.
Yeah,
Right.
But that's what I'm saying.
right.
But the test is different every year, so it's not even a
Oh.
measure of the same pieces.
And they're not gonna test again.
Correct. So what we have been told is the grades will stay frozen for 3 years. And I'm sure if you've read the paper, this is not a federal accountability status, this school grading. This is something that our state and our governor has chosen to do. So there isn't a purpose behind, usually we have to, we talked about AYP a couple years ago, and that system has changed for No Child Left Behind. they're using part of those numbers to calculate their grade for our schools, but it has nothing to do with our federal accountability. So it's something that's separate. It isn't tied to funds. It's just something that the governor decides that we're gonna do. So that's what these pieces are. Eric?
That was one of the reasons that I brought up the fact that there was something we could develop ourselves. Because if we had something that was accurate, we could say, well, look, if we took an accurate calculation, we're really a B minus, a B plus,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
And when this comes out, and we could justify to
Right.
the public, saying, here's a real working formula, here's where we really are.
Yeah.
I think people, we could sell that.
Yeah. I mean, this, when we look at these pieces of data, I think there are two things. You can think of it as an opportunity to look and dig into what you're doing in your schools, which we do, or it can be a challenge. And, you know, I look at it as an opportunity that it's a piece of data. It's something we always look at anyways, and it makes us decide, well, are there things? For example, the Manchester school had the D last year, and we dug into their kneecap data because that was the only thing we could control. And we found a really low score overall for kids writing constructed responses. And so I did print off all of the tests, the kneecaps, the kids that they took. If you have a notebook, you're welcome to pass it around. But they're asked to read a story, and then they're asked to give 3 examples from the story. And so kids are graded on a 4-point scale of how much they answer, and we found that a lot of our kids were getting 1s and 2s. Well, when you've lost half your points, you're not going to score well. So the Manchester school last year, and remember, we didn't get these scores till May, and we were testing again in October, worked over the summer to develop a constructive unit instruction plan for all students and staff. It was unrolled. The kids all had that instruction before, and they were raised up to a C. I mean, there isn't we changed instruction based on the data point that was valid for us to do. And I think when you look at any system, you have to look at the data and say, what does it tell us? What's our next step? And leave it at that. It drives our instruction. It helps us understand where are some pitfalls. And we looked at it and said, looking at trends, this is a trend we've seen at that school that kids haven't performed well in that part. So let's put some emphasis on that. So.
Mark?
I just have a question about one more, the metrics here, the 5-year graduation rate?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Traditionally, they would only take 4-year graduation rate. So if a kid did not graduate in 4 years, but they went on to adult ed and finished and got their GED, those kids were considered dropouts. They didn't count. The one good thing with the law is they've now said we're giving kids 5 years. So if they finish the December after, they're counted as a graduate. They're not counted as a dropout anymore. So they calculate both those numbers in.
So how can the
kids.
5-year rate be lower than the 4-year rate? Is that people who graduate within 4 years and people who graduate within 5 years?
Yes, and then they take a piece of that, so.
But I would think that the 5-year rate has to be higher, because wouldn't all the 4-year people also be?
No,
included?
they pulled them out, I believe. So, but I can find that number out for you.
Okay. I mean, 92% seems like a really high number if they're pulling out the people who
Well,
graduated
let's
in
say
4
that there were
years.
10 kids who didn't graduate, but 92% of them then graduated within a year of,
9 of them then graduated the
Waited.
next year.
right,
1 of them didn't.
Okay, so
so.
it's just of those people who
Correct.
didn't.
Because the one thing that I applaud Windham High School for doing is if they know a kid's not gonna make it, they've got somebody from adult ed already there, a plan in place, so that kid knows, okay, we didn't make the 4-year, we're gonna make it here, and here's where we're gonna get you the piece that you need. So, it's nice. I know, it can be confusing, but they used to just drop the 4-year and say the kids don't make it and you're considered a dropout, which is really harmful, I think.
So if there was a school in a richer town, say,
Yeah.
that had more people graduating, and so they had a very small number of people who didn't graduate,
Mhm.
and they're just never gonna graduate. I mean, couldn't they get like a 0 on this 5-year rate, or a very low number?
They could.
And that would hurt them.
But I think the way that they percentage, I can find that out, because I think the way that they calculate the percentage is they include all of the kids in the class, and then they break them up into subgroups, but I'll find that out,
Yeah,
because that's an interesting question.
okay.
Marge?
Okay, I feel like really, really stupid but
No.
at RES, oh yeah, wait till I tell you. At RES, it says grades 3 and 4.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm making an assumption, I go through this, this is the testing of all the 3rd and 4th graders collectively as I go down.
Yes.
Okay. If I read the words over to the left, on the growth, it says to measure the collective growth of individual students, that is how well that individual students, not the average of all students, improve from the previous year when they took the test to the previous grade level. Which you can really only do with the 4th graders.
Correct.
Because they're the only ones that were there the year
Correct.
before, but they took all of them into
Right.
account. So I'm not as stupid as I think I
No.
am, this is like, reads ridiculous.
I don't know what it means.
I mean, even if you go down to the, even to the bottom, I mean, it's not even just the growth one. It says, you know, in the previous testing year, the kids that scored, where are
And
they
our 3rd
now?
graders didn't have a previous testing year,
Yeah,
so.
anyway, okay.
But, and then it's, well, primary is exempt, but RES isn't because we have the 4th graders there. So if the 4th graders ever moved across the street, then you know, RES doesn't count in the formula, and so it kind of shifts all those
I
pieces.
guess nobody read this when they did it.
All right.
Eric?
But you didn't make these, did you?
I did not.
Okay.
I
But I do.
I will have to say, I
She
did
does
not.
chuckle at these.
You won't take credit for it.
No.
I do want to go back though to what you said at Manchester when you said, okay, we took the test, we
Yeah.
realized that it was that writing piece.
Yeah.
And I've seen that personally.
Yeah.
And we came up with an action plan or whatever, however you worded it, and we brought that up. Now, why couldn't we do that theoretically then with any of those and come up with an action plan?
can.
Ferret out what that piece is.
Right.
Action plan.
And,
then-
and see if we get results, that's what we're doing.
Okay.
We're moving the constructor response down to Windham Primary,
Yeah.
because that's another focus, because we don't want it to be a, let's rush and hurry up, everybody do it. So, and that's just good instruction.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, until we see this new test, we don't know what's gonna be on it yet. I mean, they'll say it's
It's
aligned
still
to
a
this
mystery
and it's
piece
aligned to
of it.
this, it's still a mystery. I know when I taught years ago and the MEA science was famous for, it was in March, and one year it was all rocks and minerals, so then everybody taught rocks and minerals before the test came about, and then next year it was all ecosystems, and your kids are like, oh, because you never knew it was coming. And that is the hardest part as a teacher, is if you look at those tests, I want you to imagine yourself as a student sitting there, you're handed the test. I'm reading my directions, because my teacher has proctored and it's very scripted. I'm reading the directions, or I'm reading the story I'm supposed to read, and I don't know some of those words. I can't raise my hand. She cannot tell me. This is given totally independent, to the point where you'll see that every page has outlined a box. If a child writes outside the box, those, when they are scanned, the child, anything outside the box is gone, so they don't get credit for it. So there are some things in there that I think that the public needs to know, that when we take these pieces, kids are totally independent doing this part. And some kids thrive, some kids do fine with that. There are other kids that panic. I mean, just a redirect to point, oh, you skipped that question, you're not allowed to do. And I know as a teacher, a former teacher, I would sit there and just about cringe, because there was nothing I could do to help them, and yet I knew, oh my God, she's writing that really long response and it's great, but that's not even gonna get scored, and you have no control over that. And it's disheartening, but, sorry, I didn't mean to go down that lane. Kate?
I did a little bit of research because, as you all know, I have tons of time on my hands. And,
Me too.
and the thing that always happens when we get these grades, although this is only the second year that we've gotten them, is we say, you know, we compare ourselves to other districts. Because that's what you do. You know, that's
That's what everybody does.
what everybody does. And so we get a C, and so then we always say, well, why can't we be like a Cape, or why can't we be like a Falmouth? Or all
Or
of
even
that
a
stuff.
Gorham over there.
And so I pulled up all the reports for the Alliance. And then I pulled up all the reports for all of the schools that we want to be kind of like, as far as the achievement grades, the A's, the B's. And there's some interesting data when you look at it that
Yeah.
way. And what prompted me was an article in the Bangor News, which was very interesting, about when you're hungry, you can't learn. And so I just want to briefly start with those stats. And as you had pointed out up there, where are we? Here we are. We are, and I got these from Jeannie, so it's a two-year thing. Last year, free and reduced, 35. This year, 36%.
So just, because I'm glad you're saying this, because I said to a community member the other day, I thought it was 38. But, so 35 and 36% of our population of the RSU
Students attended, have applied for,
and receive free or reduced lunch.
Right.
Some of our schools, it is higher, and I actually have that printed out for you, so that you can.
Because I don't
see
think
the-
anybody, I think a lot of people don't realize how high that number is.
And to clarify, this percentage only reflects those parents who are willing to come hat in hand and say, I need help.
Correct.
And as Don has mentioned before, it's probably more like 50%. And here, because I think it's important to know, then I went on to the state website and to get the data on all this jazz. 10%, this is 2011 data, 10%, and this isn't strictly children, 10% of our population in Windham are 10% are below the poverty level. Of that 10%, 5.8 are 50% below the poverty level. That's like living on nothing, okay? So to put it then in terms of free and reduced, which is only one indicator of the wealth of a community, we always throw out Cape Elizabeth. Cape Elizabeth's free and reduced last year was 7.5, and this year it's 7.7. Falmouth was 6.8, and this year is 5.7. Then we get into Gorham. Oh, you got all that. All right.
You and I must have been.
We must have gotten to the same thing. So you did all, and I think this is an interesting indicator. And I know we do a really good job with lunches and with breakfasts, but lots of kids are going home and don't have dinner.
Yeah.
That being said, then I pulled up, as I mentioned.
Well, and it's not just food, but if there's insecurity
Exactly.
financially, there's other things
There's
that come
other
along
issues
with
that
that.
are going on in the
That are-
family.
Could be
Learning.
moving, from school to school.
Affecting the student.
And I think
Yeah.
the fact that, the high school is really working on prevention of drugs and how do we assist people who have some mental issues and community outreach. And we just did suicide awareness training
Yeah.
for all high school staff. There are a lot of things going on that are not reflected in a school grade that we have to take into consideration when we're educating our children and we're educating our community. So.
Just some final statistics that I think put things in perspective a little bit. When I looked at, and I pulled our cohort of the Alliance, and then I pulled the cohort of the wannabes, per pupil spending is different. It's different for those well-to-do towns. And that is one indicator. Another indicator, which I think is I don't know what to think about this, to be honest, but their percentage of teachers with master's degree is higher. And I don't know whether that I don't know what that means, but it's a statistic. When you look at Falmouth, where almost 40%, Yarmouth, 49%, Cape Elizabeth, 46%, and Cumberland Forsyth, 53% of their staff have master's degrees. And I know we have an excellent staff, and our goal, one of our goals is to have highly trained. But I wonder what that means.
We have that number, it was on the annual achievement report, and I know that we are above the state average for staff that has master or higher in this piece. And it's on last year's, it's on, we do it every year for you.
We're
Yeah,
at
the
32.
report.
We're
Well,
at
the average
32.
on the last page says that the RSU average for a master's degree or higher is 49.1%. State average is 43.3.
And according to the report that I ran, we have 33% of our teachers have master's degrees.
I don't know, this is real.
I don't know.
And I'm wondering if they
This is
pulled that one out of,
RSU.
and I have ours pulled from Medham's and our
But
data
this
that we
one,
have in-house.
this is on the grade.
This is on the grade
Correct,
thing.
that was one change they did make this year, is they actually reported teacher attainment, educational attainment, and they also reported your free and reduced lunch. So they gave you some other pieces this year
There's
that,
special education.
and special education
right.
pieces.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of factors that go into grades, and it's
And student achievement.
it's not, you can't take them at face value. So a C is whatever. I mean, I don't want to put it in those terms, but
And it's also based on the bell curve that they have set up, and if you look at the research around a bell curve, you know, your majority of your people are going to fall there, which is your C range, is your average range. And it's set up, that's the way that they put the piece. You know, I think, I also want community to know this isn't something that we're fluffing off, but we're
No.
putting it into perspective, but, you know, the work that we're doing to move forward is so critically important with what we're doing with students. And we use data to do what we need to do and to put things in places for our kids. And I'm really proud of our staff and our leaders because those kids are coming first. And right now, the end of the year, it's a scramble. You know, we're getting kids to graduate, we want to get kids to hit those benchmarks and send them off for a good summer and come back ready to go. We're aligning a K-12 curriculum that has checkpoints in all the way. You know, we're doing the things to ensure a quality child. And I think when I look at this community and what you offer for your sports and your arts and the well-roundedness of our kids, I think it's just a great place to be. And you celebrate the successes of your students in many different ways. And I think that how do you grade that? How do you measure that piece is what I struggle with. You know, when things like this come out and it becomes, you know, if it becomes a negative conversation and it's like, oh, but it's just one snapshot.
And the one thing I would like to add is that I'm sorry, I'm not very articulate because it's after 10 o'clock at night,
I'm
but
sorry.
this is important, and I appreciate that we need to look at how we can continue to drive our students forward academically. And success in life is not defined by grades, but by other character traits. And you can look all over studies about people who are successful in what they do down the road. It is not necessarily the grade they made in 4th grade, and certainly not what they got on an NWEA. So I do not want this district to lose sight of developing the whole child because of some, you know, state mandated grades or whatever. I just think that, and I appreciate you alluding to that right now, that we need to develop whole human beings, and it's much more than some academic standards.
And your leaders in those buildings have high academic standards. You don't have to worry about them sitting back and saying, it's good enough. Nope, what can we do more?
Yes, absolutely.
And if you look at the work that the high school has done with graduation standards right now, they're leading the state on what we need to do. And it's, you know, when you're invited to the DOE to talk about, LD 1422 and the changes that are coming, they're inviting Chris Howell there because of the work that they've done at the high school. So they don't sit back. I think it's something that Mr. Prince must find when he hires all of us. They just are not complacent about what we do with kids. So, I just think it's really
I have to say, though,
important.
as a board, it is our responsibility to look at numbers
Mhm.
and data.
Absolutely.
And that drives a lot of our decisions.
Mhm.
So as much as I am not a fan of the letter grade, it makes us investigate.
Mhm. It's an
And
opportunity.
It's
It's an opportunity
definitely an
for dialogue.
opportunity to dig deeper
Yeah.
and see what we can do better, although I think our staff does an outstanding job. There's always areas we can improve on.
Right.
The one kind of question I had when I was looking at some of that data, Kate, that you were referring to, I was actually surprised that the state average is quite a bit higher of the free and reduced lunch, like 50% on average, or something like that. And I don't know where, I've read so many different things that I'm not really sure where I read this, but it's sort of alluded to where we are in the free and reduced lunch percent, that, I know you can't really say this, but that I think there were schools that were getting Bs.
That was the commissioner's letter.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So I mean, that would just be my only question.
Yeah.
Are we striving to, if our rate of free and reduced, if it
Right.
really is correlated to poverty, which, I mean, Jonathan Kozol wrote a book years and years and years ago that said this. I mean, of course, we know that poverty impacts student learning. But then we need to be pushing to get that B.
And what are they doing?
Well,
Under
that's
those
interesting,
circumstances.
because when they did a nice highlight of Gorham School that received an A and what they put in place, and we read it and we're like, we have that in place. So it's like, what else can we do? I think that's what we're searching for. What else can we do to go to that next letter grade? I mean, it's not, it's there. I mean, so we're analyzing what is it we need to do and what can we put in place based on what we have for budget and to do those pieces. I mean, we have to be realistic. So it's not a,
Back to Katrina mentioning the towns, and it was in Commissioner Rear's letter that,
Ryer.
well, right now it's Rear.
Okay, people, it's 10:10.
He
Jim Ryan.
cited, I don't know, 5 schools or whatever that are very much in poverty, and yet they got stellar grades. And I personally would be interested to know,
Did they get grants? Did they get,
how did they do it?
and those are things when Jordan Small, last year, the report that came out on Jordan Small that made achievement gains, and they were a study point for USM, and, and they were studied because of the huge improvements they had made and what they had done, and they have their PLC work and their other work, and so it's what are they doing, and can we replicate that, or do we already have that in place? And what else can we do? I mean, I think that's what we're constantly trying to do.
I think it's good to have all of the information that goes with it, because I know there are places that may have a very, a higher number that are probably a lot further north than we are, but are also a much smaller community, and we all know that if you put less, if we can afford to do that, but if you put a lot less students in one room, they get a lot more one-on-one attention, and I can advocate for that only because I think it was last year, because Jessie, my granddaughter, at the Manchester, speaking of the Manchester, took her test and went up. It was unbelievable, like 45 points on each subject that she took the test on, and they were like astounded.
You
But
mean
she-
growth?
Yes,
Oh.
but she had remedial help. And just that little bit of help, it wasn't even a whole year's worth of help, and
And
it was
pop.
like unbelievable,
Yeah.
unbelievable. So, it's for that smaller, but of course, we all know, I mean, the bigger the school and the more kids you put in there, it makes it a little more difficult. And that's only one piece of the equation
Right.
too,
It is.
So that would also be something interesting to
Yeah.
know in some of those places.
Right.
Very
Especially the
informative.
DOE is
Yeah,
looking and
it
what are
is.
they're interviewing those schools and what is it that they've done
Yeah.
so that they can share those. There are resources on the DOE site, ways to improve instruction. So those are things that, you know, we take advantage of, and we've got teachers doing those pieces, so.
I know it's never gonna happen, but it would be just so much more helpful if they would stop changing the rules of the ball game. You know, I mean, how do you measure when they keep
Right.
changing your measurement? I mean, what do you use as a base?
Right.
I mean, what's your standard? Because, you know what, 3 years from now, when they come back with something, it's gonna be different. So it'll be like, oh, well, thanks a lot, we waited to see what it was
Right,
gonna
and
look like
now,
in 3
yeah.
years, and you did all this work,
Right.
and it'll have a totally new standard that they're gonna base it against. And that's kind of like the sad part, and it's nothing we can do about it, because I know, because I've had, between my kids and grandkids, it's been in school like forever. And I've gone through more iterations of English, math, especially math, in grading and how you test and test the life out of a kid. You know, and testing does not make them smarter, as we know. I haven't figured out.
You're right, Marge, I wish we could
So I don't know.
stop
I don't know.
the things we can't control. I
No,
wish
that's the
we
thing,
could-
it's frustrating because too much is being driven from the top down,
Yeah.
and it takes away from teachers' abilities to be individual teachers, and I've heard that from several teachers, and, I mean, it is the way it is right now, but, you know, it's still very frustrating that, you know, we could be teaching to a test, and some of that individuality and the creativeness is just disappearing, because it's being put into trying to put everybody the same so that we can measure.
There's a balance, I think.
Yeah.
Because we also want to be able to, there's accountability in us producing kids who are literate, who can, you know, make change in the grocery store,
You think?
and think for themselves, yeah. So,
Very
Any-
informative.
any other questions?
It was.
No?
If you have any other questions that come up, please don't hesitate to let me know. It's changing, and we keep up with the changes and adjust when we need to, and, you know, these are great sessions to hear about, because it is complicated and it is changing, and we, you know, we want to make sure that you're informed as well, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much for
You're
staying
welcome.
so late.
Oh, you're
and for all that you
And for
do.
hanging around earlier.
Do you have a bed at the office?
I had a cot in there I bought for my husband.